Thanks, Paul. Thanks, St. Louis, for having me back. It was kind of cool flying to the airport last night because a little bit about me. I actually started in St. Louis. Actually, my first thing I ever really did kind of coming out of high school, actually, went to the military and actually stayed in the Skyline base. I actually graduated from Henry College with my BS and MIS. Actually got my MBA at Webster. So I worked in Los Angeles for a number of years. So it feels like home, like coming back to the airport and like going around downtown and stuff. So really fun. But actually, when I left St. Louis years ago with Harris Corporation, Fortune 500 down in Florida, and really just kind of took a policy compliance role. It was what it was. I was happy to live on the beach and not dealing with prices that we did so often. And around 2008, 2009, the FBI called and said, "Hey, you guys got a problem." They tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sean, you're not going to go run this whole thing. You're going to go interface with an industrial base. You're going to go clean up these APTs that we have running around the network. What the heck are you guys speaking talking about, right?" I had no idea. Actually called Mandy up, wrote them a huge check. That was my introduction into incident response, right? Just trial by fire. Ultimately helped build out their SOC, incident response team, the architect network, and do the good fight. And ultimately moved up to General Electric, where I was there for a number of years. As Paul said, took over as director of incident response for a while. Coming out of that, went to Resolution 1, which is a startup really around the IR space. Now owned by Dallas, and then really been in Cisco for about 2, maybe 3 months now, I think. So I lead the IR practice for Cisco. So I've seen IR, honestly, I've seen more incidents in my life than I probably care to address. And I'll try to cover some of those in here as we go, kind of like Grady, some good war stories. But really what I want to talk about is embedding IR into the business, right? And it's this veiled notion that we can prevent these types of things. Right? There's no silver bullet, and I can tell you no matter how many millions upon millions of dollars you spend on prevention, it's ultimately going to fail. And I quoted Grady in a tweet there, which was fantastic. These attackers have a job to do, right? They're not going to go away anytime soon. They're just going to evolve and continue to evolve. So I would start off with prevention will fail. And to me, when I think about IR, when I think about attacks, I think about what we have to deal with. I'm not going to read through these numbers, marketing, but I'll tell you an example, right? So there was one incident that I dealt with. We saw it come across the wire, great visibility. We were all over it within minutes. Unfortunately, the individual that actually went out to the website essentially got spearfished. He went out to lunch, right? So he shut down his computer, he went to lunch, and eventually he liked to go to the gym too. He liked to take 2-hour lunches. So he went out and did that. Meanwhile, the whole IR was running around like chickens with their heads cut off, right? Just trying to find this guy. We had everything we needed to respond. But unfortunately, we couldn't get a hold of this guy, right? So bag or whatever. Anyway, he gets back to work, opens up his laptop, connects to the Wi-Fi. Within 5 minutes, those threat actors had exfiltrated everything from his phone they wanted just from that guy's machine. It wasn't one of those huge, sought out, hey, we're going to come on his machine, pivot over here, this main control, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't like that. They wanted exactly what was on the machine. And they're able to do that in the span of 5 minutes. They literally just waited for that machine to come back online. So to me, a slow response just opens the door to greater risk. And when I think about the evolution of IR, what I've seen, I kind of mentioned, Harris Corp getting the FBI call. Really, the FBI called, I think, thousands upon thousands of people. I think it's 24 to 50 a little over 3,000 phone calls. Usually it starts with the 3-letter agency giving you a call. Oh my gosh, world's on fire. We need to do IR immediately. What does that mean? That means provide tools, right? So we spend millions of dollars on these tools because they're going to tell us what's going on, or they're going to prevent what's going on. And then it's like, well, how do we get these tools to actually work? So the new thing, and it's probably a couple years old at this point, but it's still new to a lot of folks, is Intel, right? We need Intel. We need to ingest that Intel. There's a great question on the iText earlier. How do we understand what to look for and understand who these threat actors are so we can put that back into our tools? And the new thing, and I was fortunate to run into Bianca this morning at breakfast. The new biggest threat line, right? To me, that's the latest and greatest, right? It's getting your stuff squared away. When you're seeing a lot of the big companies out there, GE, I'll just say very large companies who've made investments over the years. They're actually going to do some proactive threat hunting now, right? So they may just keep their mobile security operations center, their tools out there, but they're also spinning up teams to bringing out consultants to work in other areas of the network. And I think beyond what's going on this afternoon, we'll be talking. Definitely try to get the season presentation. He's one of the foremost experts when it comes to finding and detecting bad guys. So that's how I look at the evolution of IR. Unfortunately, as I started going down and sitting down and trying to figure out where companies are, and a lot of this is anecdotal, but I've been putting in front of a lot of my friends out there in industry. I came up with this maturity chart. And if you look at like the Pony report, I think that came out in 2014, it actually married up quite well with this. And really, it depends on the size of the organization, but a lot of folks right now that I run into are more that ad hoc thing, right? I think 75% of organizations out there have 0 to 1 people doing IR if they're lucky. More of a part-time basis. And then you get into those kind of maturing aspects of the companies that have maybe a little bit less than 10 folks out there. They might have actually outsourced to an MSSP to do some of the kind of the detection work and monitor their networks. I do question the validity of some of those MSSPs, just to be really honest with you. I think we see a couple of examples out there with some mega breaches that the MSSP just wasn't quite doing the work. And then I can tell you I've also taken some phone calls recently where it's like, hey, the MSSP just noticed this in our network, right? What can we do? That said, and I think, on the high end here, it's probably those 1%ers. It's really the haves-beens, the have-nots, and IR. Those are the folks that are actually bringing in the SOC, bringing in their IR teams, building out intel functions. You've heard GE's name a lot today. I'm sure Dave will probably talk a little bit about GE too. It's one of those things, when I left GE a couple of years ago, I budgeted just for IR was like $7.5 million training. That wasn't even including the intel function, which was probably about another 5 to 7 plus, right? So when you get into those mega companies, maybe like a JP Morgan, Bank of America, Target, GE, maybe some others, we're starting to get more strategic. Start to understand that incident response is really not just a necessity in a team. It actually drives a lot of the security programs at the end of the day, right? It's great that you go out and buy the newest, fanciest widget, but if you're not buying and investing in what is actually happening on your network by understanding what your threats are, it's kind of going after that. And then unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's funny, I kind of came up with this chart. Somebody's like, wow, this looks like the CMM model. I was like, no, it's not. It's IR. Like, no, it's like the CMM model. And I was like, dang it, it really is like the CMM model. So I put the CMM equivalent down at the bottom. Like I said, this is the first time I've actually showed this slide out there. I'm looking to do probably a joint webinar with like Resilient Systems, entire company. You guys are probably familiar with who's been working on this with me. But guys, afterwards, I'd love to hear some feedback on this. That said, upfront reality before you get going. You will get breached. Prevention is not a panacea. Detection is a must at this point. Outsourcing all response is a recipe for failure. I lead a response organization. I know great, working with FireEye. There's a lot of services out there, but you have to have some functionality, some capability internal to your company, or you just set up this failure. Like I mentioned earlier, speed of discovery and containment is critical. It's great that you find it, but how quickly can you take those bad guys out or stop them with their objectives? And then intel, and there's some interesting things. I've seen a lot of intel conferences going on lately. There's been some, hey, intel sucks, hey, intel praise. It is what it is. I can tell you if it's used properly, intel is very, very important. Not just for slides. So the threat landscape, and I won't belabor a lot of this, but when I go out there and I'm talking to folks, I'm still running into the lack of awareness and lack of education, right? Other than malware, right? Malware use. Yeah, there was a SQL injection. That's what happened. No, what happened is there were people out there. And I honestly don't know who created the chart. Actually, somebody sent me the slides like a year year or so ago, and actually I saw it hanging up in some other company, and I was like, wait. So if I'm ripping this off from somebody, I apologize. But I think it really lays the landscape here, because threats are people, right? Be it a nuisance, somebody's running that botnet, somebody's spamming you right at the end of the day. Maybe it's just general malware, maybe nothing really comes out of it, but it's annoying, right? Hacktivism. I used to work at Monsanto, and at GE we had a great threat capability there, and used to see a lot of anonymous stuff about to go off at Monsanto. So I remember used to send over emails to Monsanto and say, hey guys, about to get in here. And I was talking to somebody in the hallway that's ex Monsanto, and they're like, yeah, we dealt with anonymous a lot. Very annoying. And then me being a gamer, Blizzard is why I just like ruined my whole Christmas, right? I was like, dude, I want to play my video games, right? I have nothing else to do. Insiders, we don't talk a lot about insiders, especially around incident response, but I can tell you I've seen the kind of that melding of the kind of the hackers, right? The external folks, kind of with the internal folks. It's very scary. And I think it's usually a couple things, but generally, if it's a very well-defended company, you can start thinking there's going to be insiders that are working with those folks. Cybercrime, right, we've seen a lot of this with Targets, Home Depots, whatnot. Worked a case maybe a month or two ago. Didn't make the news because of the reporting requirements, right? You don't have to report the same thing. But very, very interesting. It's one of those things where if the attackers understand your business processes better than you do, and they know where to find your weakness, that have your information on how the business processes work. All it takes is for them to get into your database and start looking for flags on these SQL tables, right? Last but not least, and I think I have an example here, but state-sponsored APC. I know that's where I got my teeth. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of APC work behind the scenes. But these are the guys that are really doing really a lot of that industrial espionage, a lot of that financial work, if you will. And when I say financial, it's not, they're stealing money and credit card data. It's not necessarily true, but what they're doing is down the road, we're going to deliver repercussions, as an nation state, because they're able to use that technology for pennies on the dollar, right? They don't have to invest $10 billion in research and development on something, they can simply copy plans. That's a huge competitive advantage. So a quick case study, just to illustrate the point that attackers are people. So, mega corporation, quite a very small company, right? 7,500 people, very cool tech, cutting edge, bleeding edge stuff, right? $100 million deal, whatever it is, everybody's happy. We just want to go acquire the company, cut them over, give them new laptops, done, right? Sounds like a good business decision. Unfortunately, nation state out there, read a lot of press releases. Wow, I maybe want to know what this technology is. It sounds really cool. It's cutting edge stuff. Somebody's really interested in buying it. It must be useful. So they went in there, sent a couple pitches, and of course, it's only 75 people. They literally took over every computer in there, let alone the main controllers and every server. And literally, I call them booby traps, right? They were just sitting there waiting. Because what do you do usually when you have a merger and acquisition? First thing you do is you cut them over. Especially for HR purposes, right? Hey, we got new employees, we need to come over, give them their benefits on day one, we need to get email, we need to integrate with blah, blah, blah. They're just waiting for that company to integrate. And by the way, they stole all the data as well out of there. Now you got to wonder, okay, well, we're really paying $100 million for this company. Maybe it's not worth it anymore. So they waited until the company was connected. There they started laterally moving around. Actually, it's funny, I just recall last night, very similar situation, right? We started to understand that these third parties, when I say third parties, more mergers and acquisitions, let alone like third parties like the target breach, right, the HVAC operator, are those weak links sometimes into your network, no matter how well defended you might be. It's people, right? They play chess. This is adversary versus defendant. So fundamentals. Right, so embedding IR into the organization. Right? And when I think of a lot of the plans I've seen out there, it's like, hey, we got an IR plan, okay, it's a page, or maybe sometimes it's like 40 pages, it's ridiculous. There's not a lot of meat to it. Right? I say that, and we'll go through some steps here, but first and foremost, I think about leadership. And I know when I was cutting my teeth, I was looking at the incident, I was like, gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm working 12-hour days, I don't think I'm doing it right. But really it was, I think back to when I had season tickets to the ring, right? And we had Trent Green come here, right? And remember, he flew out his knee, I think, in a preseason game, and then who walked on? Come on, say it. Kurt Warner. And we were all like, well, there goes our season, right? We had no idea who this guy is. He's a stock shelves in Iowa, Barnes, who's this guy, right? We had no confidence in him. We had no credibility, right? If it's your first incident, if it's your second incident, you might not have that credibility as well. But over time, what did Kurt do, right? He started earning our trust. He built that rapport up with us, and the guy was consistent, right? Just breaking all sorts of NFL records for Bob and weave, right? I remember all those fun times because we just got to know this guy. We trusted him that when Kurt walked out of the field, he would take care of us, right? And that's what takes time from this response perspective. You're not going to earn that credibility overnight. Grady harkened back to some of the GE days, right, where actually I think it was Paul you mentioned, Grady calling people and saying, hey, I need to knock this controller offline. I remember making calls and saying, yeah, I'm taking your business offline, right? Because we had built up that rapport and that credibility with the C-suite that they just said, look, that team calls, they go what they want, right? Because they just deliver time and time again. No different than Purple. Organizational design. I get asked this a lot. It's like, what should the iHeart program look like? Intel, that's a separate program in some organizations, but I'll say at a minimum there needs to be some sort of Intel component. We'll talk a little bit about that down the road, strategic, tactical, and even physical Intel, right? Think about all the threats that are going on out there. And think about things like Twitter, where people are going, I'm going to this rally for protest, or I see so-and-so. That's actually physical security issues that marry up with that cyber aspect, right? The Intel team can actually play in there. Security Operations Center, we talked a little bit about MSS. I'm a component for having a SOC, right? Watching 24 hours a day. The IR team, coordinators, detection, analysts, right? So kind of your normal, everyday kind of layout there. The coordinators probably did a different thing there. To me, those are very agile teams at the end of the day. We have very, very technical folks. Let them do very technical things. Let them play to their strengths, right? Get project managers who can do reports, who can do PowerPoints, can take all that work off of other folks. And then tools and infrastructure. And I can tell you when I go back to my GE days, one of the biggest mistakes I made was when I moved into the director role. Actually, I moved this organization out of the IR team. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. It fits more over the solutions organization. I can tell you that was a huge mistake. It's because we lost a lot of that understanding by IR, and they started going off and building different types of tools, and maybe wasn't what we wanted, and they had different priorities, and hey, this new IT thing is going on, and we need to pull this developer. No, right? When you think about IR, when you think about the complexities of it, and every incident really being different, sometimes you need those folks on hand to be able to turn on a dime, assist, let alone build out new next-gen capabilities that really the industry doesn't talk about. So, to me, that's what it would look like at the end of the day. Granted, politics and dollars and cents come into play there, but there it is. But then, a lot of folks I talk to, it's like, well, there's not enough talent, right? It's probably part of the reason a lot of consulting groups are doing pretty well. So, step one to me is on hire all the talent, right? If they can have me go out and get a David Bianco or Arlen Barbie, and I'm just going to stack my team. Okay, right? That might work, but it's probably not going to work over time. And I say, well, we'll do something about it. And one of the things I'm a huge component of is going out and developing the pipelines. Right? So first off, don't be schools now. A lot of people want to go and hire the great engineers coming out of Penn State or Notre Dame or whatever. But look around at like your local schools. For instance, up in Michigan, Eastern Michigan University, I think you pulled Eastern Michigan. Nice. So I think we pulled like no less than 10 folks out of there at GE, right? So we actually went in there, we built rapport with the school. We said, hey, we'd like to start recruiting for your school. You're not here to say Michigan, right? Well, Michigan State, Eastern Michigan. Everybody's more open to us. We actually helped redesign their program. And literally, they were training folks on Python, Yara, Intel, YR. We were getting folks out of that college that were trained up. And now some of those folks are like CrowdStrike, some other companies are doing some fantastic stuff. Some of the blog posts I'm seeing, I think Josh has already done this pro training coming up here. It's like these guys are like 2-3 years out of school, and they're very senior folks already, right? The NSA also goes out there and credits some of the InfoSec programs, which is interesting. There's a short list, I think it's about 116 last I checked. And I think there's new certification too for like computer network defense. It's a lot smaller last I checked. So very short list, you can see who's local. Also, keep your mid-level folks opportunities. Right? Again, it's not all about senior talent. Maybe let the senior guys go on with clearance and something else pops up. Give the mid-level guy an opportunity. Right? We need to grow these folks over time. Have a sustainable organization to help combat that pipeline issue. And then last but not least, bring in talent outside of IR. Right? So I mentioned incident coordinator, Steve's more of an agile project manager. Okay, I can teach him response fundamentals, right, to project managers that bring a lot of rigor to that program. I've also seen very good sysadmins become great incident responders, right? I've seen great network folks become great incident responders to sysadmins, right? That's when the aptitude and appetite drive desire. There's a lot of folks out there taking an opportunity. Documentation, I know everybody needs documentation, but the thing I'll really go on to is I don't think I've run into an organization yet that said a wiki is a bad idea. It seems like every group I talk to is like, yeah, you guys have a wiki to track all your issues and your follow-up. I hadn't thought of that. You know, it takes like a day to stand up a wiki at most, start getting information out there, it starts becoming very organic. I know when I came in a couple months ago at Cisco, hey, where's our wiki? No, we don't have one. Boom. Right now it's just growing leaps and bounds. We do default to open, right? So we try not to lock down all the IR information. There's going to be more folks out there that need it. Now, it's not to say Susie from my team can come to your wiki and start digging around. But someone will go there. And then track changes is probably my favorite place to go. Like, I've been using media wiki for years now. I usually just watch track changes and see what's going on. You can see the latest and greatest. It's almost like an RSS of your IR. Availability. I won't belabor this one too much. Just a couple caveats here, but you know who's needed for his response. I can't tell you how many times it's like digging up. You know, okay, who's the lawyer for that organization, right? Or who's the networking guy that runs this, that, and the other. Or you know, who is the lead? Who's the CIO? Who's the CISO? Whatever it might be, but make sure you have all of this stuff documented somewhere, right? And then you build out some pre-existing deals. It's all sounds very basic. There's a lot of things like having multiple conference lines available. Right? You may want to have one conference line for the biggest thing going on. You may want to start siphoning off into other conference lines. Maybe, hey, there's going to be a group doing host-based analysis on this stuff. Maybe there's going to be a group that's looking straight at feedback. Or maybe there's another instance that pops up at the same time. Very simple things, but a lot of issues I've run into over time. Races. I think Paul and I were just chatting about this, right? It's especially when you think back to like the GE days. It's huge teams. I think when I left, we had like 200 folks on like all hands calls, right? And I've heard the team got larger since. So not everybody does everything, right? Very specific, very defined goals. Sometimes those lines can work. This is very basic chart. I think I just made it PowerPoint, so I don't put too much into it. But set those expectations up front. If you have those folks coming together and working on a racing, it sounds annoying. It might take a day or two, probably over a month or so. But people actually come together and talk through things, and then when something actually happens, they go, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, right? So it might just be, let's be honest, it might just be an artifact that you come up with great once, and you probably don't look at it ever again. But it's a good exercise to go through. So it's severities. Right, right? So not all incidents are created. So define a common lexicon, right? So I think when I came into like the GE server, we had this huge list of incident severities, and I remember we got on the phone and we're like, how do we fix this? Like a mess, right? It's just too confusing to like understand what's going on. So I actually simplified it and made it more flexible. So first off, like I said, not all incidents are created equal, right? If I'm dealing with random spy infection, am I really worried about that versus maybe a APT 26 that Greg was talking about? Hey, I see APT 26 over there. I want to spend my time over there, right? Very different. And what we actually came down to was really three severity ratings. One is they've exfiltrated data, they've stolen things, right? We need to get on that, we need to contain that immediately. We had a 1 hour limitation on there, but really I think we got down to about 15 minutes back to the G6. And then severity 1 and 2. Severity 1 is more, hey, they're in there, they're moving around. If we don't get to this ASAP, this could be bad. And this is where just because they've gotten into your network doesn't mean they want, right? Maybe, unlike my story at the beginning where they just wanted that first guy's box, maybe they want something that's a couple hops away. If you can cut them off in the path, so to speak, you might be able to take them out of your network and stop at least that exfiltration. And then last but not least, severity 2, this is what I call just kind of good network hygiene at the end of the day. So like I said, the random spy eyes, spoofs, like crypto locker, which is the point, generally would fall into that bucket, right? Where there's not too much you can really do about it at the end of the day, but it's really cleaning up. Communication, this is another area where I see people just have not thought through, especially in IR things, right? How are you going to communicate when incidents happen? And the last thing you want is your CIO or CISO saying, hey, I need an email this time, this. You know what? Define that ahead of time. Right? When are you going to notify them? Are you going to notify them on every crypto locker infection or every random piece of malware that pops up? Or are you going to wait to escalate when you do have the APT running around your network? Maybe there is an organization running around your network. And then who are you going to contact and when are you going to contact them? Right? Setting those expectations ahead of time, huge difference back to that leadership aspect, right? The credibility, that rapport. Leave me alone, let's do our job. Won't email you at the end of the day. Internal communications, I like to throw this one up. This has worked for years. I've taken it not just for TU, but used this at other places as well. It seems to sum it up pretty well what's going on in it. Right? So kill chain phase, we'll talk about that real briefly in a minute or two. Businesses locations. So what business, what location is it? Sao Paulo, is it France? What's going on in summary? What's the impact? And you see a little dotted line there. That's generally when most executives they're done reading, right? Where did it happen? What's going on? What's the plan? But then, next update, back to when are we going to communicate? The incident status, right? What's going on there? Intel and attribution. Some executives think they take it school here, salsa balls or energetic bear, blah, blah, blah. And attacking the north, what they're doing, what they're going after. Some care, some don't. Then host status, and then action items, right? So I remember we used to not do an action item stable. It was like, what do you guys do next? You guys aren't doing anything. No, we got a bunch of things to work on. Put it out there, show what you've done, show when things are going, who owns those things. It's also just a good reminder to folks that have these items too when they're due by. Keep in mind though, it is an incident, and a lot of times, estimated time completion can and will change. So, careful. The other last thing too is, I think the structure of the green items very useful, especially when you start thinking about Droid and iPhone. Very quick way to see what's changed, what hasn't changed, right? Saves a lot of time. External comps. I see a lot of companies falling into trouble with this. So in Twitter, right? People know that you're reaching before you do sometimes, right? It's not that crest mentality. Somebody was joking, like, you've got the crest, right? When you know that everybody knows you can reach before you and Judy John, I guess they're not related from a business aspect. If you actually go to the site where they have the breach information, actually we're copying from each other, which is kind of interesting. Although I couldn't track back and find that it was like the same communication companies, I think they just, anyway. And then easy to sign NDAs. That's another huge one that a lot of folks forget, right? So when I talked earlier about third parties, being an issue, sometimes you have to get on the phone and say, hey, you're being leveraged to attack my network. I don't necessarily want to get into deeper information here. However, we have an NDA, we can shoot it over to you, and then we can start having a real conversation. Those things pop up more than you would think. And having an NDA already squared away with your lawyer, very, very quick win, very easy to get over there. Hopefully, their side is not that obstinate. Some Intel highlights, and I won't go too deep into Intel because that's a whole talk and shoot a whole conference in of itself. But I love this for MWR with security because we kind of laid out the whole Intel realm spectrum. So you have tactical stuff, which generally is going to be kind of methodology, tactics, the tactical aspects of things. I think like data pyramid thing, right? So I think like indicators, where those fall in that. Operational. Hard to learn. That was a little bit tough to get ahead of. Sometimes you can see some scanning, sometimes you can maybe see some, maybe a Twitter or hey, we're going to go attack so and so. A little rare. And then also strategic, right? So that's more of the board level stuff. So it's, hey, it's great, we've seen these 5 actors are always coming after you. What do they want? Why do they want this stuff? Oh, they want solar energy because that's what they're going after. Very useful. And when I said Intel is one of these, I think this is where most folks are kind of saying, oh, it's useful or it's not useful, right? IP domains, pretty useful. And then back to the pyramid of pain, right? As you start getting into those tools and techniques, it can be great, but at the end of the day, it depends on your organization to use it. I also love the kill chain. I think I've mentioned it a couple times here, and I won't go into this talk. But really, this is something that came in a Lockheed Martin and putting it into practice in an organization. It's a very good way of understanding attacks, let alone educate your executives and leadership on how these attacks actually work. Right? It's not voodoo where somebody just says, oh, everything's compromised. There are a lot of different steps and iterations that had to go on there, and a lot of different places where you can actually detect these adversaries, let alone kick them out of your network. Like I said, I won't go too deep in there, but definitely worth the read and understanding that. This is my last Intel slide. Last but not least, indicator management. It's not up here, but I think Chris is up there, the top picture. Used that for a number of years. I'm also very familiar with RightConnect now. But really, how do you manage your indicators, right? It's great. I've seen people, they have maybe 100, 500 indicators, and they get more and more. You think about the ABC one report, a couple thousand indicators in it. Your spreadsheet was cool, but not anymore. So you need to start managing those indicators somehow and access databases that can do it for you, right? And understanding who these threat actors are, start understanding those relationships and how they link together. And it does help manage the sharing problem a little bit, but I do agree with the conversation on the ISACs earlier. That's a little difficult to get a hold head up, especially if you're only one of the verticals, right? And last but not least, it started to get kind of that standardization across the board for how we talk about Intel and how we share it for Intel. I don't think it's there yet. I think it's getting closer. Containment collection. Containment is probably the most critical decision in IR, right? Which is how many or how quickly can we cut the attackers off, and how do we take them out of our network? They may come back, right? I get it, but for now, let's take them out. So first off, who can access compromised devices? How are you going to track down the devices, right? Especially a huge network or global device, right? When do you continue that? There's a debate on letting the adversary sit there until you understand the entire picture. And then there's the, I hate the term, but we use it as whack-a-mole, right? Oh, we found one in this box. Let's kill it, right? We found here. Let's kill it. I think it really depends, too, on the capabilities of your organization. Who makes the containment call? Okay, so I mentioned earlier, I used to make phone calls and say, look, I'm shut down your business, or look, great, but I was in power, right? Because that's the leadership and trust. It might be the CIO, it might be the COO at that point. I remember calling COO once and saying, hey, I'm cut this thing off. He goes, son, you cut it off, we $5 million a day, we're going to get that back up. Okay, maybe I won't cut it off. Maybe I'll come up with a very clever idea here, right? So they kind of intend to need to have somebody with maybe a level head who's not just black and white, right? And then what methods will you use? So this is one of those things that's often overlooked. I think I just put a blog post out like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And, you know, most blog posts, it's like, hey, this is how we do things. Well, I actually started the blog post off with like a little mini story about this random leader screamed that somebody didn't take the device. And it was funny because I got a couple of emails and it was like, dude, that totally like explained my situation, right? Because people haven't thought through the laptop, right? Can you literally pick that thing up and go from maybe your home network? If you're using VPN, maybe you didn't go to the office, maybe you go to another office. Is it a desktop? Is it a server? Running OS X, running Windows, online, offline, right? Sometimes if you compromise devices, they don't come back online for weeks. What do you do then? You just forget about it. So continuous using. I think I also mentioned to somebody out there, thanks for back up. So yesterday I had a phone call with somebody and they said, wow, what tools do you, how do you deliver IR? What tools do you use? And IR it's not about tools all the time, right? It's, no, you have to have a tool, you have to have an endpoint tool. Okay, I get it, but you don't really, anyway. Very odd conversation, but Cisco, we do have an endpoint tool, it's great. Cisco AM, it's in the Magic Quadrant. That said, you know, we've also come up with something we used to use it. General Electric, we just duplicated this concept here, which is advanced line response, right? Which basically, it's really just a batch script that goes out and grabs what you need to do. Right? You can recreate this. I think there's some great tutorials online. I think there's actually some folks that have built a couple of these really LR scripts, is what I call them. You just drop them on a box, you run it, you get the data back. Now, I want to skip ahead, but the real question is, you actually know how to use data, right? Would probably be the next step. The other aspect, though, is okay, you drop it on the box, maybe email it to somebody who can use VP, whatever it might be. The easy thing to do, especially with AWS and whatnot, is have it upload. Right? Upload it as well. You don't necessarily need to pull something from Australia all the way back to America. Like that might be possible. Or maybe third world country where you're trying to get the data from. So go up to the cloud, pull it down, and then really centralized storage and analysis. And this kind of gets back to the maturity model. This is probably where some more mature teams are doing things out there where a lot of the stuff is automated from the back end and just hey, I've done 5 things for you to look at. Okay? So before you even get into the data, it's already started flagging things. And like I mentioned just a second ago, it's who has access to those devices. The forensic evidence is properly trained to do it, right? So it's great if you can run the script to get the data back, but you actually know what to do. And I would also, really the third bullet there, preserving the forensic evidence. I can't tell you how many times, and I cried, I think back to one instance. It was a third party, call them up, they said, no, we're not hacking. Yeah, you guys are hacking pretty bad. Guys are actually leveraged to come into my organization. No. It's very fine. Call back again, talk to the CIO, and say, yeah, no, that stuff doesn't really work. And I'm trying to explain to this guy. Long story short, I actually threw my phone against the wall. It was just a frustrating conversation. That said, actually convinced those guys to let us get onto their domain control. That one, the analysts actually hop on over WebEx, go into the system log, start poking around. And it was like, who is this guy? It's like, oh, that's me. It's like, did you log in at 2 a.m.? No. Did you log in at 2:15 a.m.? No. Okay, you start to see this book. It was making me cry at the same time because we were just stomping over evidence left and right. And of course, what did they do? They went off and ran into devices, right? So, who's trained to use runs? Who actually knows what's going on? Can you get access to the logs? I can't say how many times it's been frustrating. Oh, the networking guys don't look at those access to those logs. getting that stuff ahead of time is definitely critical. Analysis infrastructure, another area, don't forget to invest in this. Servers, definitely in the back end to be able to process some of these things. I think I used to have a quote on here, but like NFT parts, these used to take like 6 hours back in the day to GPU, so we got some new devices in, took 15 minutes. 5 hours, 45-minute difference between the analysts sitting and waiting for this information or getting to work. And then also responder laptops. The canned garbage you get from your IT teams is probably not going to work for you, right? Get out there, invest some money, use MacBook Pro, and get those things working in your organization. Running out of time here, and that's why we're measuring towards the end. So make sure you're measuring things as you go through. It helps with the maturity model. So look at things like dwell time, which is how long the attacker actually will be found. Contain time, how quickly you can take them out. The business impact time, what's the downtime of the organization. So dwell and contain. Here's some kind of graphs over time that you can actually see on the dwell, for example, you're actually starting to get better, right? So maybe those investments in the processes that you're doing are starting to organization. Average time to contain, right? In this example, go from like, gosh, this is a nightmare to actually, hey, we're actually getting something. And then monthly contain time, there's a little bit of Six Sigma stuff that they kind of graded in. So start looking for a route, right? Put histograms together and say, hey, it's great on average we did this. Well, let's look at these 5 or 6 years and see what happened, right? What's going on? What did we do wrong? Is there something broken in the process? Intel and detection. I think this is one of those underlooked areas, right? So it's great. We go out and buy all these technologies, and I think David put it together once. I think we had like over 40 technologies in GE for detection. And it was like, dude, we're not even using these things, right? I think we were using like 4 at the time. And then we actually started putting some metrics together and saying, okay, what's actually working? Smart IDS, right? I think we started putting Row in. User reporting was actually working, so on and so forth. And then, in this example, not to pick on Mandiant, but maybe Mir was just flagging false positives all day long. That's a lot of work on false positives. So prioritize your detection, prioritize your platform, what's actually working for you. And the new thing that I'm starting to talk to people is really about Intel, right? So the Intel that's coming in, who's got better stuff? Usually it's the in-house stuff that you actually run on the battlefield. Maybe you're buying free professional services of Intel. I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but who's giving you false positives? It's actually giving you something useful. So collection and analysis, I won't belabor this, but again, looking at each aspect of incident response and understanding the collect time, right? The analysis, understanding, hey, are we doing all the collections over Brazil? Maybe we need to get a little bit smarter down there somehow, right? Stay prepared, return testing, right? So paper tests, definitely the easiest thing to do, right? Making sure you're going through and updating your documentation. Tabletops, right? Spend a day doing a workshop and exercise. And then probably more fun stuff is the work aids. I remember GE once they had Rob Ford who was speaking tomorrow. He dropped a couple of piping strings out there on a couple boxes. The whole team spun up, screaming, and my phone's blowing up. And it was funny, I was sitting in my office and I just see these people walk across over to Rob's desk and they're like, right? And I was like, all right, that works. Unfortunately, we didn't catch the other string that put out in the box, right? We had to go back and fix what we were missing. Also, outside of IR, it's not just about incident response. Think of things like venom and heartbeat, right? So obviously, opportunities to team go out there and hunt, look for things. Software piracy, counterfeit gear, right? So during downtime, go hunt, do cool stuff. And then wrapping it up, I used to think incident response kind of looked like this, and some people put it in kind of linear, detect, collect, respond, analyze, mediate. I used to think this is the end all be all, but you actually start putting the whole picture together. It looks more something like this. Probably the most important aspect here, at the end of the day, getting that lesson learned, rolling back to the other functions. Right? It's great that you responded to a bunch of incidents at the end of the day, but probably what's more important is that you're actually influencing the security strategy, the direction, the architecture. Hopefully mitigate, help you out. So final thoughts, prevention will fail. You need to invest attention to based on example, why am I worried about APC? Maybe you should be, I'll be probably more worried about it. Intel's more than nice to have to me. It makes a lot of sense. It's a huge requirement. They can ask IT, right? Get out of the IT specific things. You need to partner with business. You need to partner with local colleges. You need to partner with your law enforcement organizations. Communicate your findings. You can't harp on that enough. Team sport, and last but not least, especially teams that respond well. Make sure you're taking care of your people. So that's it. Thank you. Questions? I knew you were going to ask that question. I was sitting there, I was like, yeah, I don't have a great answer for that. You know, fortunately, I think it meant for GE, right? We were only assets, right? So we had that ability to look across all of them. I absolutely agree with Brady's answer. There's no perfect solution there. And I think it's not the best answer, but I do think the vendors, like, for example, Cisco, we have Talos, which is fantastic, great intel there. CrowdStrike is great intel, Many is great intel. I go back to, I think the vendors are probably the best aggregation point for a lot of this stuff. But then I go back to that metrics chart I showed. Okay, it's great, go out there, maybe get some of that intel, but then make sure you're measuring it and making sure it's actually working for your organization. So I wish I had a better answer, but you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on the slides, a lot of them are really quick. Is there a way we can get any access to this PowerShell?
Yeah, so go to SeanMason.com. I'll throw up a blog post there probably in a day or two. Video will be eventually. And I'll put the slides out there.
So where would it be?
SeanMason.com. Okay. Yep. All right, guys. Well, I'll be walking around there.